This is my garden wagon. Had it for a few years now. Um, purchased this specifically for use at the Renaissance Festival in Texas Renaissance Festival with my daughter. And I've done a number of changes to it over the years, primarily that I generally don't pull it, I push it. And I have early on designed, very first year, this handle. I modified it some this year to change the angle, and I've added things over the years every year. And this is how I push, okay? And I steer with this. And last, a year or 2 years ago, I had the self-centering bands so that I don't have to constantly think about keeping it straight. Otherwise, it took a lot of mental agility to keep it going. I was the only one in the family who could push my daughter. And then this year, I changed the angle. It used to lean farther forward, make it easier to steer, but I tended to almost hit her when pushing. So I brought it straight up. This is easier, so I don't need that angle to assist as much. And then I added some metal ring to keep the bands up. I used to have a piece of hose and zip ties there. That keeps this up. I take this off when I put it in the van. One of the other things I've changed, rather added, it took me some time, are these electrical conduit arches for a cover piece of canvas. And they were designed on one end because there was a time when I thought maybe I would put the gates on the other way and allow with a handle for my daughter to steer while I pushed on these bars from back here, and they're at the right height for it, a little close. Never really worked out, can't trust her to steer, so I've always pushed it, but very rarely pull it. And I'm going to now make some adjustments to these because these were bent as one piece, to cut here and insert what I have designed or developed out of conduit pieces, this insert, which will lock in to the top bar, produce a 1/2-inch internal slide, and these button pins, and then allow me 12 inches of travel to raise the height of these bows when they are in the up position, right? So that when they're in the back, she has a higher head clearance and such. And then I will add 2 more bows after this part's done to full out raise the top that will be adjustable and make it flat so she's got headroom over the top. And I will come back with those videos. The other thing I'll point out, these are pretty cool and very useful because Ren Fair, drinks, whatever, bottles of mead, these are actually bed raisers. Put a bed on them. Got them at Goodwill, very cheap, but they work very well because you can drop stuff in here, stand them up, and it gets water, condensation, or anything else, you can just dump it out. The bottom is 1/8 inch MDF board, type with linseed oil so that it's water resistant, and there is a yoga mat, camp mat style material glued to that to pad it. And then I'm using a Academy bench seat for her to sit on. I'm gonna take all the flowers off. They've been on there for years. This year we're going for Halloween first off, so I'll probably remove all that. It'll make it easier when I flip it on its side to drill these holes and cut the bows, and then take on the task of attempting to bend new tops that have an arch in the middle, not a full circle. Clearance issues when it's back here, just a little bit, enough to make watershed to either side for when it does rain. I did it flat the first time because it took me a lot tinkering to figure out how to do this offset so that they were on the same axis, but ended up on the same plane. Anyway, I'll come back with some more when I get to the point of having cut this and putting the other pieces and showing how the slides are going in. Okay, real quick, I wanted to show how I did some of these things. These are conduit connectors. This is a 3/4 inch. It had a ring on there that I unscrewed, and I am cutting this end off. Using these because you get 5 for a pack for 7 and some change, whereas these are almost $3 a piece. I'm using these only for the top portion of my slide because of fit and finish. That the bow will be here, and this will slip into the 3/4 inch so that when it's done, it'll be a nice clean, just this ring. And then I have, using these pieces, sacrificed because they're cheaper, to make the slip guide, keep things nice and snug, and then a lock It keeps this from coming all the way out, right? And then gives me some length of overlap here to keep it nice and sturdy. And I'm cutting these. I'm using a piece of 1/2 inch because it fits inside. A fitting on one end, that's how I started. And then I will put the other fitting on the other end, line it up to my saw blade, and then cut with this as little out, or if anything is possible, to support this piece when it's being cut, right? And then I'm making some now that will lock in place this piece, or you can grind off the pieces from these and make a slide guide. And then I have these ordered on Amazon, and I will set a pin in there to make sure that these don't get pulled out internally. And all these things will get swedged in, but now I'm about to cut this. So because I've already done these, this is how I started with just another piece. Make sure you get your little grooves up and down. So more or less you're just trying to support on my grip that the piece is out further than this block will hold. I'm just trying to keep things snug so that I can cut straight. As I went on, I ended up just using my already manufactured slim slides because they were easier to fiddle with, not worrying about which way that little raised ridge was. And then I will adjust this pipe back to cut off as little or none as possible. And that's how that's done. Okay, real quick, because it worked really well, I'll show you what I did. I had these stainless steel rod that it's just what I had. What can I say? And I didn't have a drill bit that I felt like would leave perfect fit. But what I did have was this drill bit and this tap, which I didn't have any bolts for, but it leaves just the right amount of give in that hole so that when I put my insert in and tap through with a hammer, I can set this in the middle and it will slide inside the 3/4 inch test piece that I have here, and then I will take it over to my steel surface and I will peen these over to keep them from coming out, and that will retain this, keep it from coming out if anybody ever pulls on the awning up, so that this doesn't stain its holes and come out. Anyway, all right, third time's the charm. This is the jig I came up with in order to drill these holes nice and straight. I'm using a level to keep them consistent. The cart is on the side now. I've got it supported so that the bottom rails aren't messed up, and I have had these on for the other project with the grinder. Metal sleeves, they are 1 side bolt drill bit size up from the one I chose, the 8mm pins, and then there's another one on the bottom too, just to ensure that it goes out straight. And then I put this pin in there, rather a screw, keep it from moving around and wiggling when I do my drilling. And I have these 2 strips of trim tape that you can use, and I use them to line up so that I can get nice and center. Anyway, I have, what, 5 holes? Yeah, 5 holes per pole, 10, 20 total. Anyway, all right, so here we are. Let's try to get out wider and get them both in there. So that is more or less the height that they always were, other than being slightly taller in the middle because they were flat. And this is the slide mechanism. Okay, so bench pull, pretty straightforward. And it goes up and locks it. So I will make 2 more arches, I believe, probably just to keep them shorter once these, and I'm not sure where I'm going to connect them. Maybe down here, lower, I don't know. Thinking about 2 more, but I am going to replace a rack that was on the bottom that was like a closet rack. It was janky, it was tiny, didn't really hold much. I've not been able to wrap my head around previously about what to do, but I think this time I'm going to wrap my head around conduit as a frame system for it with some eye bolts to hang it from, and I will come back with that here in a little bit, and I don't know, wrap my head around the extra arches for the canvas to get more points of support, At some point I'll have to figure out, put the canvas back I have back on there and see about where to put snap points on this to get it back in. But hey, now it's up and it's taller. It can be taller, up to a foot taller. So this is the canvas top that I've had for a number of years now. Snaps for if I turn it sideways, it'll snap on one side, the other side snaps on the other, snaps at the front, and then just tapers down. The snaps are really kind of what help this stay in place, but now I'm going to work out some ways to lock these, or limiters, something that will lock them in position, because they will move under here and fall out unless I go back to adding snaps that will then hold them in their position. But I don't know, I'm not 100% sure about that. Snaps, we'll figure that out. Move on to doing the rack system for underneath. Okay, so I'm working on the bottom rail, and just because I like using what is on hand and I don't like wasting stuff, these are actually the original top bows been cut off. And because it's, for me, with this tool, damn near impossible, if not impossible, to bend these kinds of type U's, I'm using these kind of connectors because, well, short of a tabletop press or using a lot of long pieces of conduit to have the leverage, you just can't really bend a short piece to a full 90. It's very difficult. On a tabletop it'd be no problem, but I'm going to cut here, and because I could not get this sharp turn and manage the space that I have, what I've done here is I've traced out on the floor. The orange line is the dimensions basically of the bottom rail here. I have some traces for where the tires were, and then blue is where my theoretical hanging points are going to be, thereabouts, for the eyelets that I'm going to use, which are these. And then the black line there is my desired shape, so I'm going to cut that and use one of those puppies there and finish it out around. This sticks out further than the outside of the rail, but honestly, I'm shooting to have it be the same width as this. This has always stuck out since I put it on there anyway. Every once in a while it's a problem, but for the most part, you know, you're avoiding other people and everything anyway. But that will put this within the parameter or the space of a rack shelf, essentially. And yeah, I could buy a bunch of these and get hard corners, but I don't really think that storage is worth it. And then after that, I'll work out how to do a fender well in here to keep things from getting splashed. But I wanted something that's more functional, stronger, and in the end, it'll stick out in the front. It'll be almost a step for my daughter to get in, or an adult who needs it, and a much more durable and hopefully actually strong enough to potentially even be a lift point for this thing, or for it to be able to rest, pick it up on, or set it on something to be able to take tires off and do other things to it, whatever else, sort of a lower frame section. So I love it when things are just work out. So I had this sketch on the ground where I wanted this thing to be sticking out the front, where I wanted it to turn, or I wanted it to land, and I had these two hoops that were original. They weren't even exactly quite perfect. In order to put a coupling on both ends, you had to kind of fuss it, but I got it there. And these marks are from my original bending years ago, my start points for my marker on my bend. And I literally put this on the ground, looked at how far in the inset was, decided it was about an inch back from my mark, marked it back an inch, cut it, laid it in, and these are the ends I cut off. And this is where I'm just like tickled, because I kid you not, I don't think I could have planned that. Okay, so real quick, I wanted to cover how I'm making these connections, because these things they're good for things that are held in place and not whatnot. And I didn't really want to use epoxy. This piece is the end. Actually, right now it just happens to be in front of me. So do your layout. You're going to take your pieces, you're going to set them in, you're going to put your piece in, and you're going to snug that thing down like you normally would. But what that does is it leaves a little divot, a circle, and then I am with it in the place, lined up and holding up one at a time so I get straight, going in with a drill bit that will slip into without destroying the threads. Okay, which is essentially the shaft side, not the thread size. And that makes a hole, and then I'm coming back in with my impact and the right size big tip, and I'm driving that in, and it is punching into the conduit and more or less threading itself in to the inside. and pulling it back to straight, squaring everything up, and this is not going to come apart short of a screwdriver at this point. It's going to make this a very strong connection without having to do any kind of glues, adhesives, or anything else, because these points to me are going to end up being lift and stress points. You wouldn't expect that normally, but I'm going to demonstrate that that is going to be full well expected, especially since my connection points to the frame are only, you know, this far away, and they're after a curve, and these curves, when they're bent, are actually taller than they are wide, so they have more strength this way. I wanted to discuss another aspect of assembly when doing these things to keep everything square. So this is left side, right side, etc. This is my center. From here it will go back to this other piece, and I am about to set this one. Now if I left these off, which I've just got them on there temporarily, they will be lower. They're going to tilt and twist, okay? Because that side's going to try and settle. In order to keep everything nice and straight as possible, it is advisable to use shims, expendable extra pieces that line out your heights, so that this piece will be square and straight when you come up to it. Now when I get to that piece, it's taller than all these other pieces, so I'll have to determine that height and put shims under my other settings, so that when I pop the screws for these, that they are also straight, and I end up with a straight level piece that's nice and solid. Alright, so there it is, shape's done. Next step is for me to go and essentially hang it. I'm using some eye-rings. I've got to carefully, if I can salvage it, I kind of want to replace it, is remove this under carriage. You can see that, find the right angle, I can see my camera right there, lighting system that I put on that is in the place where I'm going to be using mounts. So that will be the next step. Sorry. That's made. That's the space it will occupy behind this rail because of turning radius in the wheels. In between the wheels, enough space lines up with the edge of the support. Give me some room to do my wheel wells, and if worst comes to worst and I need a little bit more narrow, I'll just take it apart, cut, and re-sandwich. Alright, so done. A lot of back and forth, more than I would have preferred for sure. Going back and forth trying to get this thing all to fit, and some of these are a little wonky. That one, I wish I had thought of it from the start. Get a tap, drill these out, tap them, replace these bolts with longer ones, and I probably still will, may even go up to larger size to replace these bolts with ones that are long enough to not only grab on this side but compress on the other side. The joints like this work really well like that. Some of these, they've just been beat up too much by the time I got to them, and that one's crammed in there, but won't be a pay attention because eventually I'm going to flip it over, mark, and cut a bottom that will screw onto this with standard like conduit mounting to give it a tray. The challenge in a lot of this was leaving this top bolt here loose so that I could adjust it, because I kept trying to think I could just screw this on there, but really I had to disassemble all this upside down, hold this bolt in place, line it up, nail it down, screw this tight, and slip the rail back through and reassemble it, because there was no way, short of like a come along setting where one of these is reverse thread, to raise this up without spinning the head. But at this point it's done. I can pick up the whole thing by that quite easily. It is at this point, and I won't stand on this, and I don't know, we'll see if that stays. I may end up putting something else on there, but I'm pretty sure that the board I'm going to put on there is going to help support that. And really the main thing I expect is for my daughter. So alright, so here we are cutting the bottom pan. I spent some time considering the number of options, having already spent money years past to buy a nice piece of 1/4-inch MDF board for this bottom piece to put the foam on for the bottom. I already know how expensive stuff can get, so you know, buying 1/4, 3/8, something that was big enough to cover that distance, which is more than 24 inches wide, you know, I was at $40 buying big sheets. This piece is $80. Yeah, that's expensive, but wood, you know, on the bottom, go wet, it's gonna rot, get damaged, I have to paint it. plastic, fragile. This is aluminum. I mean, it's going to be durable, it's going to be solid, and then I'm going to use other pieces from the top to finish off here as another top plate to make the step so it's not inset. And it's going to be, you know, bolted, through bolted all the way around. I've through bolted all these points here. Finally, it was my last option, just make these things as rock solid as possible, through bolt with acorn nut on the inside to get rid of any rough bits and pieces in order to get this up and under it so I can trace it. Took the wheels off, used my car jacks too, not because it's so heavy, but you know, obviously stability. And I've realized that these puppies are awesome. They're the right length, that they rest up here on this corner when it's up and riding, but if I pull it out, drop it down and sit it back, it will rest on the tongue. And I can latch it down and it doesn't move around. It keeps the wheels from turning. And if this is not latched and it turns to either one of these sides here, it will fall through and this drops to the ground. It just works out that way. So I'm about to take a short break, come back, trace out, double check, and then start cutting. It'll be a little bit of a challenge going over this stuff here, but my concern was if I trace it upside down, it might not be as close to the same shape, that there might be some differences, and I know there are. And these bends here from one side to the other because of the way they were, which direction they were bent, whatnot. Anyway, so far. Alright, so here we are, it's cut out. It's not screwed on yet. My back is killing me just doing this much. It's sitting on there. I notched it to go around the eye bolts. Gotten to everything's finished, trimmed, nicked, all the corners are trimmed. I just wanted to see it on there. I'm gonna have to turn it over and go through the process of drilling and bolting it down, and then I'm going to use my nylon hammer to round the edge here down and up. And before I put this piece on, I'm going to bend this down at a 45. Sorry, I'm not used to holding cameras, looking at what I'm doing, not what the camera's doing. Bend this at not a 45, at a 90, so that it comes down and closes this space there, and then puts a little bit of reinforcement on the back edge. But I'm also, like I said, going to nylon hammer the pan up, round it around, just to, well, I know I'm going to do that down. The pan around the bottom, most likely just to keep it from catching on stuff. Alright, there it is, all locked down. Put this on its side real quick. I took the time to hammer, roll the edge all the way around, including on the top. And then I overlapped this piece here so that on the back I folded it and rolled it a second time to reinforce this. And it's been all screwed and lock nutted all the way around. Watch this. If I balance myself right and throw my weight forward, I can stand on it. It's just a matter of how much weight's in the back of it. But I beat on that thing with a hammer and I saw how much it moved and wiggled and whatnot. And before I had all this screwed on there, I was already standing on it, but if I put enough weight in the back, it will hold me. Alright, so here's where I shoot a short video because I realized I have, have pictures that didn't have context and photographs of these pieces. And really what it came down to is that I mentioned when I was doing the shelf that I wanted to do wheel wells and fenders. And I originally thought, oh, well, I'll just go out and find some buckets that are the right size and the right shape. But that proved to be very difficult to find things that were the exact dimension that fit in the space that was available, because buckets have a taper. I didn't really need a taper. And then I was faced with what scrap was left of this very expensive piece of diamond plate. So basically what follows is I took the largest piece that I could reproduce 4 times over. That shape is literally just because of the rounds of cutting around the pan that ends up using this little horn shape. Some of the horns are a little bit longer, a little bit wider, but this was the average. And then the other, the fender, and these are rounded. I used to flatten out because I had to use several buckets, literally Home Depot buckets, to press and shape these into a close to round shape, turning it both directions to try and offset the fact that buckets are curved, and also, like I previously mentioned, and then get it to the point where I could then hand hammer with the over a ball peen hammer, because I don't have anvils. I don't have a nice little set of round balls. That's just what I have. And then it's a picture of the setup, the clamp that I used to hold the largest ball peen hammer I had in place, and then the mallet, the nylon mallet that I used to curl the pan in the first place, and then the process of going through and hand curving and curling all of these, and then getting them all bent to the same similar shape that I thought was going to work, of course, and then saying, okay, now I'm to the point where I can make these brackets, and that's where the next video cuts in. Is I have made with steel from Home Depot, made these repetitive brackets that will hold each fender in mirrored sets, where and then I put the wheel in there and realize, oh wow, these don't actually fit very right. I have to tweak them even further, flare some out, and then of course, because I only had that much material and that wasn't really enough to produce an entire mud flap area, I had to then source plastic buckets to produce actual mud flaps that will be addressed in the videos from there. I just didn't have a video because I was under such pressure to the timeline I had coming up, and I knew this was such a major part of making it look right and giving it that look, and really just for me a flag of saying, yep, I used the whole sheet. I literally have a small piece of scrap left, and this is out of order, but I wanted to make sure it was in there. And this is a very minute period of time compared to the 2 days of hammering, of just, that was all I was doing, just shaping, before I even moved on to trying to make brackets that were repetitive and reversible, so that I can take them off and turn them around and face them the other way for when I in the future hopefully tow this wagon behind another vehicle. Alright, so I took a number of different attempts at shapes, come up with something that was consistent, symmetrical for one. So and this is what I came up with. It is the simplest thing I could do. 5.5 inches, hard twist, bend at the hard twist, 2 inches to the end, there, the width of a bar up, and it gives me the spacing I need to give me just clearance for the wheel to turn and for the fenders to sit on top. Now they do need a little tweaking, but it is finicky to tweak them all individually when they are just clamps. So I'm going to move on with marking and drilling and getting these things solid so that I can get them mounted, and then move on to cutting the pieces of plastic that will come down here on the backs, sort of like mud flaps. This is what I had as scrap left from cutting this piece. That's why it's the size it is. It's even why it's the shape it is. Alright, it has been quite the ordeal getting to this point. The fenders took twice as long as I expected, but I also was originally just going to cut buckets and parts and screw them on there with the bottoms and sides plastic. But I had the material left over, and really it ties it all together so well. That thing hanging on the bottom, I mean, it did its job. It was what it was, but it looked a little out of place. But man, now let me tell you, I'm just giddy. The fabric came in for the top, replacement fabric in a red a couple of days ago. I've just been focused on getting through this part so I can have that satisfaction of completion, and then move on to working out the attachments and placements for the top. And if I get around to it, maybe a brake drum sort of idea that I have to attach one of these to the inside of the wheels, and then use small child's clamp brakes with a splitter. If everything comes here and I have time, cable, handle, brake on the handle, whatnot. We'll see how that works. Okay, so after a personal sense of success in completing the fenders and wheel wells and such for the wagon, I'm on to the next portion of what my plans for this season were, and that is to replace my original gray, poorly made top that was all I could afford at the time to put something on top of the bars, and it is literally a yard long width of canvas purchased from Joann's. I used it for sideways because that's as far as it would go. I had put some snaps on it, which didn't really work all that well because, well, you have to have them nice and straight, and if they're not all straight and whatnot. Plus, then they put tension weird. But I ordered this on Amazon, and before I did this time I did some digging, found some videos from a canvas company, an awning company, and they said, number one, don't cut it with scissors, cut it with a hot knife. So here's my table. I don't have a hot heat resistant surface, but this is 2 layers of my lovely HEB extra thick aluminum foil taped down, then with a layer of my parchment on top, so it's non-stick. This is my now heat resistant, and I think it should be fine for cutting that thin material and not damaging my makeshift table in the first place. Taking the time to mark on here with a permanent marker, a grid system for measurements, because in the end I'm going to be doing large things. And my first goal, in that video they talked about using pockets. Granted, they were doing a straight bar on the front of a building, but I think for my goal it should work fairly well. That curve, I'm just not sure how it's going to have in the pocket because of the arch. So first thing I'm going to do is chop up the old one. I'm going to cut off a section. I'm going to trim the edges, and I'm going to sew it, almost lost my pencil, onto this piece sideways as close as I can to represent the width of what's there, so that I can put it on and pull on it at an angle from this front spar or the back spar. Either way, same problem. The middle one I'm not concerned about because it's dead centered, but these will be further out at the tip than they are at the base. I want to see how it plays. Plus, I've never cut this with a hot knife before. It'll give me a chance to practice that, verify that the setup I have works before I start cutting on the big piece. I know this is a lot of little pieces, but I've added, and it's hard to want to post any of this at this point because, well, I don't really have regular viewers to update, so I just want a sense of completion. When I'm ready and this thing is done and I'm as far as I can get for the season, then I'll put all this together into one contiguous video and post it. Until then, I hope this stuff interests somebody. I hope this ends up being somebody at the Renaissance Festival says, hey, that's awesome, I can point them to the channel, and maybe I get some views out of it, just because honestly I've got nobody else to share this stuff with. Anyway, okay, so I'm about to set up, rather I am set up to do sewing for my test piece, my tube that I'm going to put on here 12 inches back to give me a little bit of a droop and an awning and enough fabric to pull on the front of the cart to see how it hangs. I undid my original sewing on the ends to make it as wide as possible, as close as I can get to the width of the fabric from the uncut. And I'm going to sew it down, and yes, this is my Husqvarna sewing machine, gift from my sister years ago. Yes, it's mine. My wife does most of her sewing on a Juki Serger, so she does use this occasionally. Bring it out here just because I need the surface area to be able to feed through, whereas my normal sewing area is much more cluttered. Well, wish me luck. Come back when this is done, put it on there, see what it looks like before I move forward with cutting, or rather melting, because that's how you do this stuff, the red fabric to sew. So it's a good idea if you have a machine that you share with somebody else in your house, and you don't necessarily know what was done on it last, and you don't know how long it's been there, before you start sewing, to check your bobbin to make sure you've got enough thread. All the way to the end here, thought I was doing great and didn't have bobbin thread. And I gotta cut my line. Not that it matters, this is a tester. I tried sewing sideways to feed it all the way through, and lesson learned, should have known. Don't change how you use a tool in the middle of trying to do a project. If you always sit at your machine like this, don't try and operate it sideways. That's stupid. I was stupid. But hey, this is why I'm doing testing now, so that I can work out all the kinks and I hit the best finished product, because people are gonna see me pushing this thing around and I wanna be able to be, proud about it and not looking at all the glaring errors I've made in my mind when I'm talking to people about it. Okay, so some time has passed. I'm running out of time. I kind of forgot to shoot some stuff. The pockets sucked. I didn't like the way it hung on the canopy rails. I prefer the look of a taut line over the top with the canvas on top. Trying to make it then fitted so that it folded right and hung right was nearly impossible. In the end, I've elected to just go with tension cables that will be sewn in the middle here, there and there, to hold tension over the top, and that way the sides can be folded up out of the way or drop down. If it's rainy, the back can be dropped down for shade. I can take it off because these will be attached with Molly gear systems, and I can lay it down like this if I wanted to as a picnic blanket, or leave it on there. This is rather tight. The red fabric is from Amazon. I had to iron it. The black strap is from Amazon. I have some white strap that was a find behind a school on pallets from shipping, whatnot, sort of a dumpster find that will be used in the middle for some reinforcement. And there'll be 3 cross section there with long strips in between. I just wanted to shoot this real quick because I literally have to move stuff around to have enough space for this 3 yards of fabric that I cut square, rounded the edges, and then serged twice all the way around, because the first time it may look like serger, but when it went the second time, it just covers it better and it gives it more finished look. And it also dressed up because I did not trim the original factory edge. I left that on there to keep the maximum width on it. It doesn't bother me that it's not waterproof, or it's not slightly ugly. It will only be down when it's raining or sun's really bad. And honestly, it just goes to the fact that this is a very utilitarian item. Okay, I know earlier in this series I jumped on myself for trying to turn a sewing machine sideways to work with it. I'm kind of doing it again, but this is a really long piece, and I don't have a formal sewing table with a long flat. I don't have a inset. I don't have any of that. So this is what I've come up with. I am pulling my extra leaves that would normally be stored underneath out, laying it out that way, and I have some books that will fit under here, some kids books that will raise this up a little bit. That is just the frame section for the support, and that will allow me to run my taco through this way nice and long, because it'll have to be rolled up to fit through the machine. It'll get me closer to my sewing level. It'll keep everything nice and flat, that way I don't get any wonky humps or whatnot as I'm sewing the strapping to the fabric, because I want it to be nice and flat. And this is what I've come up with. Again, my regular table, just pulled 2 leaves out from underneath, put them on there, and I'm leaving a gap so I can set my sewing machine in between and give me an impromptu surface. All right, so I'm about to sew sideways because I have to run it through like a taco, and it's going to be a challenge because I'm trying to sew it incrementally, and ideally the stitches would be this way, but best case for this type of connection is this way. So I'm thinking 2 little rows of parallel so that I can go, and then go, and so on down the row, leaving these in between open. Here I am, 1 week till the Renaissance Festival. I've had the top on, it fits. I'm at this point just putting on these attachments that will allow me to roll up the excess material along the edge for the nice days when it's not freezing cold or raining. These clips are just on my front Hobby Lobby there, and actually over in like the paracord jewelry section. dongles, elastic. They're fiddly. The elastic gives out. This is much more durable long term. They are very small. You do have to really kind of get at the clip to get them to go, but they hold very well. And once these are all sewn on, it will go onto the cart. And unless I maybe take it outside to spray it and try and get some of this chalk off from the markings, it'll be on there. I'm not messing with it again because I'm moving on to the brakes. All right, there it is. This was my original goal, was to add the shelf. I'd make the the uprights adjustable and replace the canvas. Well, the canvas is kind of automatic with redoing the uprights. The shelf, the fenders was because, you know, I had the material and I wanted to keep things dry under there because, you know, wheels kick up stuff. So we have full-on proper fenders, wheel wells, mud flaps, a shelf. We've got a cargo net to keep anything from falling off the back, a bag for essentials, and the battery pack for the LED lights. Grass, because of course, you know, grass. A custom modified Academy Stadium seat with adjustable tilt. That's also new this year. And then the 3 yards of canvas that opens up and will drape down to here, front and back, for cold weather, rain. This is the tucked up version. I have yet to drop it down and look at how it folds out. Folds back if I can fold it back the way it is, or if I have to flatten it out before I fold it back. But pardon the messy garage. This is what my goal was. I still want to work on the brakes, but this is what I knew I was aiming for as my target. I knew that I would be okay going to the Ren Fair like this because, well, I've gone before without brakes.
It's recording.
So on a rare occasion, I have somebody to help me hold the camera. My daughter, who wanted to come out and see how the work on the wagon is going. I want to show real quick what these are. You've seen the big ones. You've seen the little ones. This is for my motorcycle. Didn't want to show that. I wanted 2 identical ones. These are from AutoZone. I cut the hub out. I ground it away. I've cut a piece of tin that I will roll up. It allows me to wedge it centered on the hub. Once I clean the paint off, I will weld this on, and then I'll move on to welding the brackets for the brakes itself. Brake drum. Stop. Back to recording by myself. All right, so this is a bracket that number of years back when my daughter was I'm trying to come up with some way to put brakes on the thing. This is the size of the arm that the axle comes off for the wheels. Okay, so what is it, 2 inches or something like this? This happens to be from Home Depot. It's from the electrical area. It's a locking brace to hold off electrical U-channel stuff and box frame. It's super overkill. I knew it was overkill when I got it. The plate, I kept it because it's what worked, and really what it was, I was just trying to put this in, I could slide a piece of plastic between the wheel and the frame, and then this just kept it from turning out when the wheel turned. It was just a friction brake that kept the wheel from rolling around when it was parked. Now it will be a base for me to weld some box tube, which I have notched up because my 1-inch piece will fit between here with enough space to be able to turn the nuts. I'm going to flare it just a little bit wider than 1 inch, 1 1/4, both sides there, done an angle. I'm going to do a flap, I'm going to tap it down and weld it, mostly just because I want it to look pretty. The damn thing is tiny. Cost me almost 20 bucks to buy this 2-foot piece of metal. I really got to get away from buying one-off pieces. And then I have these machine bushings that will slip down in there. These things will get welded up, and then that goes over that. That'll get welded in this piece. A nut and bolt will go on that. This will get bolted onto the arm, and the axle will rest essentially here with the drum that I manufactured in between. Nothing but the best here. So this is my block, my clip, using a 1/4 inch bolt to index, give me some extra length to verify that it's as straight as I can Sorry about that. Straight as I can get it. Nothing but the finest here. This is my little welding booth. It's a vacuum box, has holes and perforations on the other side. I use it on whatnot, but anyway, this is my block. Using a 1/4" bolt to verify that I've got some length. It's just a little Century flux core. Tack this thing together, get it cleaned up, get it painted, and move on to bolting these things onto the damn trailer. All right, here we go. First side's on. I don't even have both cables on this thing, so it's like a doggle. It only pulls so far. And again, it's not even on the ground. This is just me wanting to see the damn thing spin. I had to adjust it up to the lowest point here so that it's in the center, which is where I kind of designed it. But I did have to move the brakes back because the nuts and stuff were rubbing. And I may change the style because these are a wedge. I imagine they'll wear more rounded, but they just seem funny that they're angled into one side already. But here we go. And I don't even have, I don't have this on the handle on the mount yet because I don't have the cables long enough to reach all the way. So I've got very little leverage on doing that. I'm just doing it. All right, well, until I can get my hands on longer cables and put it on the actual handle, this is it. I mean, it's not stop on a dime brakes by any means, but it is certainly more than I had, and it's something I can, when I get done, find a way to latch this thing into the on position to locked so that when I park it, it doesn't want to roll away or something. They do twist a little bit, but I mean, what do you want? Okay, so the original brakes that came on these things were old, rough. They had a bevel. They only touched in one very narrow area. I knew they'd eventually wear, but I didn't want that, so I went and got some Bell brakes replacements for basics. They are flat. They still, when you brake, you got rotational force. One goes down, one goes up. They want to try and do this. So I had an idea, and I wanted to get, the ones that were longer and bend them, but they bolts are too long. They didn't fit. You got to stick with this kind. So in order to offset that rotational force, what I've come up with is these just bent pieces of scrap from my other parts of the fender frames and whatnot. And these will have the room to, they're setting down in there right now, but they do have the room to move back and forth. And then when I get that rotational force, instead of one coming down, it will literally just engage the braking more. If anything, it will rotate in. The other one will do that. And I'll have a better gripping force. I've just doubled the amount of gripping surface area I have and reduced one of the things that let it slip. We'll see how it goes. It's almost bust time. I gotta start working on dinner. All the other fun things that take me away from these kinds of projects. But I'm gonna drill, put it all in place, check my fitment, and then pop it off and paint this. I don't know what, I'm out of black now. So we'll find a color just to keep it from rusting. Okay, I'm done working through prototyping, or not prototyping, but finessing. I tried several positions. I started with the braces on the inside, and it just had the brakes so far open that I was maxed out, and I was just not getting in there. So I put my arches to the outside, bolts on the inside. I'll probably come back and grind these down because they're close. They're not touching, but I just when it was wide and the gap was wider than I wanted, it was coming to the point where it was close. I can take it off. I don't need it. There's lots of threads in there, so I'm going to clean that up just for my personal preference. But it fits really well now. So we got it centered, and it was difficult to adjust because I'm working with the original junky wires that are going to be replaced supposedly tomorrow when the new ones show up. Heading backwards, it's late. I'm getting tired. So, like anything else, you just want to make sure your brakes are in the right place, not off to one side or the other, because they do still teeter by design so that they have some play, just like on bikes. So we got a free spin. Ooh, that's me hitting my mud flap. I'm happy for now. All right, so here it is. We're done. Today is Thursday. I go skating tonight. Brendan's fair is Saturday. I picked up my daughter from the bus stop today. She said it was done. Right, babe?
Yep.
I got all the brakes on. It's not car brakes by any means, but it already has allowed me to go down my driveway and down hills without having to pull back like this. I'll hold it still some when she got in. Everything's complete. Brakes, fork caliper. We're all done now. Next is decorations and going to the Ren Fair. This is some footage that has occurred after the Renaissance Festival, after the wagon's been decorated, and really just never had any opportunity to show off what the lighting did with all this shiny chrome, rather polished aluminum. Added the bar across the bottom as a bumper in case I hit anything. Plus it adds a lift point that I lost with all that stuff in the way. So lights on. Weather's terrible outside, and I wanted to put it in a space where I didn't have so much junk in the background for the thumbnail photographs, because damn, they were terrible. The flowers are specific in that they are related to Day of the Dead choices of flowers, not as much as sunflowers, but I have a personal affinity for sunflower, and I can tell you the monarch butterflies make it all the way to Mexico, regardless what flowers they choose to use to celebrate there. These guys feed on a lot of things along the way, including sunflowers and passion flowers, both of which I grow in my yard. So I'm going to go through a series of this is what it's down. And honestly, I put it up when I got there because I wanted to show it off. But in large crowds like the Renaissance Festival, it makes navigation a little stressful at times because I have to look under the tarp to make narrow clearances, and it'd just be a lot less. If it had just been hotter or rainier, I would have had use for it and wouldn't have regretted putting it up. But honestly, I put so much effort into it. I wanted to see the thing up. I wanted people to see everything the way it was. So because I'm pulling on this thing, I have my brake on. I haven't worked out a more efficient, but that works. And that's what I was using when traveling. So we can lift this up. Cart will still roll around some, but and then we already unsnapped it from its stowed and rolled position. Come out. I'm going to stop this and open it up. So this is just open, not erected, not unfolded, not clipped. First thing to do is connect our clips front and back, and remembering where I had previously adjusted it so I know, because when I got there I was in a rush. Oh, let's hurry up and get inside. And I raised the back more, or the front more, I can't remember. One more than the other should have been, and it pushed the tarp backwards into my hands and was in the way. I had to alternate it to get it back to where it was supposed to be. I will connect my snaps on now. They're using the original locations for pins to make the gates removable, which I use, repurpose this. The canopy rests outside of that and keeps the folds inside, keeps it from sliding around. It just made me feel more secure, and it hasn't been movable since I got it. I immediately bolted these things together, and I zip tie the bottom so that when I do take this off, it's not floppy at the bottom, it's held together rigid. So this is the position that I took the day in. It can go higher. It can go 6 inches higher in the front, middle, and back, all around. But at this point, it's far enough forward and far enough back that it covers the front. It doesn't get in the way of my hands. But this is not the final storage. This is how it's folded for when I'm putting it down. I could leave it like this. It doesn't look terrible. But what the camera doesn't pick up as much or as well is that one side of the fabric is this proper red, and the other side has this sheen to it because of the waterproofing. But these are the steps that I put in to maintain I also have snaps here that they come back out to. But what I do have to check at this point is that all of my little ties here that I used held position. Some of them have a tendency to want to pop off in the erecting process, and then I will move to the next tarp down, roll it up position. So this is totally unfurled all the way down, rainy weather. If I lower the sides, she still has headroom. Her crown might not have fit, and it probably would have been brushing against somebody like mine's head. It does an even better job. The front definitely hangs over. I can roll that back. I've considered putting something to hold it up. I've considered cutting it off. But the next thing I'll do is roll it up. There are a couple of positions that I can achieve here if I use these snaps forward, that then produces this back side shade and leaves the front open. I can actually do it front and back, and it's got like this windowed effect, which is kind of cool. That would be great for really hot sunny days or environments. Gives some viewing area on the sides, but like I said, provides shade. I will start the process of rolling up these sides. They more or less roll along my seam lines from my tarp sewing. So front and back fold cuffed based on the width of their strap sewing, to the point where my first set of attachments appears on top that will then snap here, there, and there to allow it to fold over and hang without unraveling. The same occurs in the back. So once those are snapped and folded, then we are then just long on the sides. I have this roll here, which is one of the reasons why I don't store it this way, because this tuft of fabric across the front and then what's about to be on the sides would just be too much of a bind on itself. I'd get a lot of hard creases and wrinkles. I don't want to damage the fabric in that way. Next is to flip these up on the top and snap their sides on, where they'll just flip down. They don't really roll the same way. So then this snap and that snap will join. And there she is, folded up. And once the sides are folded under, you end up with this long tuft that then I come and just turn and tuck it back into these corners. Keeps everything nice and tight. That's the way it drapes. Now, use in my own personal review. Grass is great, not a great hot day. It's not really an issue of, oh, the black's so hot, because it used to be black fabric. Nobody spilled anything catastrophic, so we didn't have to pull it out and dump it off. Though I did account for that. All the holes that were in it were sealed with E2000 or shoe goo to make it so that any water that landed on it or whatever other liquids could be pulled out and dumped. As to the brakes, you know, like I said, it ain't car brakes. But I was concerned personally that I had spent all that time and it wouldn't amount to much. But I can tell you, walking in crowds, those brakes were awesome. I would frequently in the past, if I had people step in front of me, have to almost backpedal like a big boat, like a big tugboat. Pull back on the handle, put it in reverse, and offset the forward momentum. I had control, constant control with that brake. Even if I was just nudging it forward with the brake on and just letting it slip, there were a number of times that I would have not been able to easily get through the crowds as well as I was. Honestly, the only people that ever had an issue was little kids who'd get in front of me because they weren't paying attention. But I was never moving fast enough for that to be an issue. Some of the other last little things I did, I sewed this more or less like a molly cord strap across your extras that gave me my attachment points for gear. I have in these things supplies, band-aids, lip gloss, shit I've always needed in the past, some incense because lovely things burning smell wonderful, and then the flowers, which I can't say enough about using this hose stuff. There are some things that are just stuck on there at the last minute, but this piece will come off as a unit. It will get coiled away and it will get saved. If I ever need to take it off, it'll probably stay on there through this year because next is Dewberry Farm. But this is the final result. My pillow sewed on with some straps, hold it up. Buckets that were easy to dump. My daughter put her trick-or-treat buckets here on these handy little Molly gear clip things that came in the kit. I had some hanging points up under here for stuff. We had these cute little magnetic butterflies all over it. It was a great time for most everybody. I was a little grumpy at times, but I really enjoyed the project and I look forward to using it some more. And I hope to get some feedback from some people. I hope maybe somebody will come find this video who saw me at the Ren Fair and say, hey, what's up?